Hello everybody, welcome to this instruction video. This video is about knitting a pair of socks. It's part of a series in which we knit a pair of simple toe-up socks. The first video was about the cast on, the increase in the toe, the foot, and now we get perhaps to the most difficult part of the entire process, and that's the heel. So what's here in the green, this heel, that's what we're going to be knitting in this video. So with the foot of the sock completed, the next step is to knit the heel. And the heel you're only going to knit on half of the sock, and this is where it comes in that you've marked this one edge of the sock, because we're going to be knitting it only on the needles, on the stitches that are on needle 1. So only on half the sock we're going to be knitting the heel. And to knit this you'll be using 2 double pointed needles. At least that's how I knit a heel. So I'll only use 2 DPNs, and then the rest, and then the stitches here on the back that are on needle 2, we're just going to leave them, don't worry about them. And I'm also going to knit the heel in the same color as I did for the toe. So this green yarn I'm going to use for the heel as well. But we'll just first start by slipping stitches. I'll show you how to do that, and then we'll actually start with the heel. I've got needle 1 facing, so if I was to continue knitting I would now just continue on this row, but I'm not going to do that. You see I've got the marked side facing, and I'm going to slip all the stitches that are on needle 1 onto a DPN, and you see here I've got a 2.5mm DPN, so this is the same needle size as I'm using for the sock. I'm just going to pull the stitches from, I'm just going to pull the cable out a little bit to the back so that I don't accidentally have any accidents there. And then the stitches on needle 1, I'm going to slip them over. And you slip them over purlwise. That means insert your needle into the stitch as though you're going to purl. And then just one by one, I just slip all stitches that are on needle 1 onto DPN. And for me, I have 28 stitches on here. If you have a different size sock, you of course might have a different number of stitches here, but you've got half your stitches on this needle, and you're going to slip them over onto a DPN. Almost to the end, the last few stitches, and then this is the last stitch. There you go. So now I've got all my stitches on from needle 1. I've got on this double pointed needle, and then the stitches here that are on the cable, they're on needle 2. But you're just literally going to leave them dangling there. So bring them to the center of the cable. So don't leave them on the needle. Really bring them to the center of the cable, that nothing happens to these stitches. If you're really concerned, what you could do is you could put an end stop on the needle. That would possibly prevent accidents. What you could also do is, if you have an exchangeable needle like I have, just pop off the needle and put an end cap on. And that could also prevent accidents. Or if you want to, you could even slip these stitches also on the back here to a stitch keeper. Let me just see if I can find a stitch keeper. Yes, I do have one here. So if you want, you could even slip it onto a stitch keeper if you want to. But I'm just going to leave them here in the center of the cable. Then my experience is that this is usually fine, and then nothing happens to them. And then we're going to continue with the stitches that are here on the DPN. Now row 1 of the heel, we're first going to start a decrease, because if you look at a sock, if this is a sock here, you see you've got, if it's a 3-dimensional structure which are actually 2 triangles. So first we're going to work a decreasing triangle, and then the other way around we're going to work an increasing triangle, and those 2 components together will give you the heel. So we're first going to work this decrease, and then we'll work the increase. And you see here on the edge, you see well, these stitches that are there on the edge, those are so-called short row stitches, and we're also going to be making those stitches, and I'll show you exactly how to do all of that. So we're going to be working a decrease part, and then we'll work an increase part. So the first part is the decrease part. We're going to also continue in a different color yarn. So this is the main color of the sock. Leave this yarn attached. Don't worry about it in any way. Just let it dangle there. We'll pick this back up when we continue after the heel. For now, I'm just going to insert in the first stitch. So I've got a second DPN here that I'm going to continue with. Insert in there, and then grab your new color yarn and loop it up to work the first stitch, and then the second stitch also. I'm just going to grab the correct yarn, because it make sure you work with the long tail. 2, and then another one, 3. I just like to do the first ones, I like to do English, and then I swap over to continental. There you go. So now I've knit 3 stitches. I'm going to knit until this entire row, until I have 2 stitches left. So I'm just arguing with my yarn here. There we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to knit every stitch on this row until I have 2 stitches left. And that's going to be the point where we're going to make the first short row stitch. And that's going to be a knitwise short row stitch, also called a double stitch sometimes, because it's called a double stitch because you're actually going to make an increase. You're going to make 2 stitches in one, because one stitch is going to be for the bottom half of the triangle and the other one is going to be for the top half of the sock. So you're going to have one on that goes down and one that goes up. Don't worry, if you don't understand what I mean, don't worry. But for now, we're just going to knit every stitch until I get to 2 stitches left, and then we'll make that first short row stitch. Oh, there, I've split my yarn from the previous row. Just pop up that entire stitch. There we go. And I have a few more left, and this is the last one. Now you can see, I just tuck it a bit, then my tension is nice and even. Now I have 2 stitches left here, and this last stitch we're going to leave that one unworked, and in the second last stitch we're going to work a double stitch in there. I'm just going to zoom in a little more that you can just see it a little bit better even. Now this double stitch, okay, if you look at the stitch to the bottom, we're going to be picking up the right hand loop. So pick up this loop here, I've got my needle in, and bring it up to your left needle. So using your right needle, the stitch that's in the, so at the bottom, the stitch where you're in, pick that loop up and bring it up to the needle. And I'm just going to purposefully keep this one separate. So you see that the stitch there, I'm just going to pull that back, and the reason is because I want to knit into the loop that I just popped onto my needle. Knit into that loop, slide it off, and then bring it back. And now you have 2 loops in the one stitch at the bottom. And that's and this here, this was the short row. We're going to be making quite a few more of these, so I'll show you them again when we get to the next part. So this was a double stitch, this was your short row stitch. And now for the first time in this entire sock knitting process, turn your work around, like flip it. So you're going to look at on the inside of the sock. So turn your work. And now you have the inside of the sock facing. And now we can work row 2 of the decrease. And for row 2, we're going to purl every stitch until we have 2 stitches left, and then we're going to make a double stitch again, and this time it's going to be slightly different because we have the purl side facing. And now we're going to purl all stitches, and I always find purl just slightly more cumbersome than I do knitting, but for now just knit every stitch until you purl every stitch until you have 2 stitches left. I've only got 1 left, this last stitch here, and now I have 2 stitches left on my needle. And now we're again going to work a double stitch, and this time round we're going to use the purl bump to actually make that stitch. So to make this short row stitch on the purl side, and then in the second last stitch here we want to again make a short row stitch, so a double stitch in there. And on the purl side it's slightly different. So we're going to first start by just slipping this stitch purl wise to the right hand needle. Now you see this here below the stitch, there's that little purl bump. I'm going to pick up that bump. So you're going to pick up that purl bump. And now comes the tricky bit perhaps. So hold on to the loop that's already on your needle because you don't want to lose that. Then insert your needle through this purl bump that you just had, that you just picked up, and now purl through that stitch, or that stitch, that loop. So purl through that loop and pull it out. Now you see you have again 2 loops, so you've made an increase, 2 loops in that one stitch. And then slip both of these back to your left hand needle. So now you've made that increase there, so you've got two loops in the one. And that was the purl short row stitch. Again, turn your work. So now you're going to have the right side of the sock facing again. And now we're going to start working, so now you've got an anchor point with this, on the one side you've got a double stitch, and on the other side here you've got a double stitch. And these 2 stitches are your anchor points, and we're going to be, in between them, we're going to be working decreases until we have a nice triangle. So this was row 2. Row 3 and also subsequently row 4 are going to be repeat rows. You're going to be repeating them until you have the correct number of stitches. So row 3 is going to be this. It's going to be the same idea as what you just did in row 1. You're going to knit every stitch until you have 1 stitch left before that short row stitch. So that double stitch that was at the end, that special stitch. Knit every stitch until you get to the stitch just before, and these rows are going to get shorter and shorter because you're going to be decreasing the triangle. And so now I've knit every stitch, and my next stitch here is a normal stitch, and there's that double stitch. This is a short row stitch. You see it's got the 2 loops in one. And this stitch, this one, that's the last stitch here, I'm now going to turn that into a short row stitch, and this is knitwise. So that means I'm going to pick up the bar that's below the stitch. that right bar. I'm going to pick that up and pop it onto the left needle. Then through that loop, so I'm keeping my finger on the stitch that was already there because I don't want anything to happen to it. Knit through that stitch, slip, and then bring it back to the left hand needle. And now you've turned that into a short row stitch. And turn your work. So again, turn to have the inside of the sock facing, the purl side facing, and then we're going to do row 4. For row 4 we're going to do the same idea as we've done before. We're going to purl this time every stitch right until we get to the stitch before the double stitch. You see, here's the short row stitch, the double stitch, and then the stitch just before it, we're now going to turn that into a double stitch. So we're going to stop when we have one stitch left, and then we'll turn that into a double stitch, a short row stitch. So I'm just going to start by just purling every stitch until I have just that one stitch left before the short row stitch. And these short row stitches, they're relatively easy to spot because they look different. They have these 2 stitches in one. This is then the last stitch that I'm going to purl, because right now you can see I have there's a double stitch that we just made in the previous time we were purling, and there's one stitch left. So in this one stitch here, we're now going to turn this stitch into a short row stitch. So same as in the previous row, so we start by just slipping this stitch over to the right. Then pick up the purl bump. Just get the yarn tail out of the way. Pick up the purl bump that's below the stitch. Pick up that bump. You see, so that's kind of like that little bump there. Insert your needle through the stitch you're going to purl, and again I'm holding on to this loop here that's on my right needle because I don't want it to fall off or do anything weird. And then purl that extra loop that you picked up. And then you've got 2 loops in the one stitch, and slip them over to the other side. And now on your left needle you have a normal stitch here right at the end, and you've got 2 short row stitches. Then turn your work again. Now you have the knit side facing. For row 5, because this is the next row of the heel, row 5 is going to be a repetition of row 3. That means what you're going to do is you now have the knit side facing. You've got a normal stitch on either side, and then you've got 2 short row stitches, and then you've got a whole bunch of regular stitches here in the middle. So what you're going to do now is going to knit every stitch until you get to the stitch just before the short row stitch. That's going to be the stitch here, because you see here's a short row stitch and that's a short row stitch, then this is a normal stitch. So this one you then turn into a short row stitch again, so into a double stitch knitwise. So that was picking up that loop here to the bottom and bringing it up. Then you turn your work and you have for row 6. And then you're going to again do a row 4 repeat. That means purl every stitch until the stitch before the double stitch, then turn that into a short row stitch purlwise. And then you turn your work again for row 7, which is going to be a repeat of row 3. And this way you're going to continue. What you'll see happening is your work will form a triangle, and every time you're just going to stop one stitch short. So this double stitch, now you have 2, then you'll have 3, 4, 5, 6. You'll end up building more and more of these double stitches along the end, and your number of center stitches here, the normal stitches, they'll be decreasing. So you'll form a triangle. And you'll continue to do that until you have, well, depending on your shoe size, I do this until I have 8 stitches left here in the middle. So 8 stitches that are not short row stitches. And so depending on your shoe size, you'll have a different number of stitches here, but I do this until I have 8. You can double check the pattern how many you need. So go and continue and repeat rows 3 and 4 until you have the correct number of center stitches that are not double stitches. So I'll continue this until I have 8 of them. So I'm going to make a jump in the video, and then I'll show you what your work looks like at that point. When you've finished all your decreases, all your decrease rows, you'll be at this point here. You'll just have finished a purl row, and you'll have the right side facing again. Here on the needle is, on either side is one regular stitch, then a series of short row stitches, and then in the middle you have again a number of normal stitches. At this point, so I've got 9 short row stitches either side, and then 8 unworked stitches in the middle. Now I've finished the decrease part, and this is now the total length of the sock. So this point here, my fingers, that's going to be the point where your heel is going to be. It's really the edge of the foot. And this here is now the total length of the foot. And now we're going to start the increase part again, and that's going to be the top side of the heel. So this was the decrease side, and now we're ready to start the increases again. Row 1 of the increase. What we're going to do is we're going to knit all the stitches here that are on the left needle, and then in the last stitch we're going to make a short row stitch again. That's the idea. So we're just going to knit all stitches, and we're going to be placing a few stitch markers as well. Now the first 8 stitches for me are just normal stitches. So this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. So these are just the normal stitches that I'm going to work. Now just slip a stitch marker on the right needle, and this is just to mark the point where we're going to start the increases again. For now we're going to continue knitting, and on all these short row stitches, you see they've got these 2 loops together. We're going to treat them as though they're one stitch. So through both of those loops, so the entire stitch, just knit that together. And then this is going to start the increases again. And knit all these short row stitches together. You can see you're just going to treat both of those loops as though it's a single stitch. So it's like you're knitting like a knit 2 together. And for me I've got 9 short row stitches, so I'm just going to knit 9 of these. So you knit them all together, knit all of them. That's the point here. And this is the last one. And now you've got 1 stitch left, and on this last stitch make a short row stitch again, and this is a knit stitch, so I'm just going to pick up this loop here at the bottom of the stitch below, pop it on the needle, and then through that loop knit and slide it back onto the left needle. You've done this before. And now rotate your work, turn your work I should say, so that you have the purl side of your work facing for row 2. For row 2, what we're going to do is going to purl all the stitches until we're to, and this last stitch, that one that's at the end here, going to turn that into a double stitch again, so into a short row stitch. And halfway through we're just going to place another stitch marker, and that's just to again mark the increases. For now, because it's a purl side row, I'm going to just purl all the stitches, and for me now it's just the next 9. So these are the stitches that were short row stitches in the previous row, but now are just normal stitches. So I'm just going to purl all of these. And there's no need to be fast here. You can just go at a slow pace. Then slip that stitch marker over and continue and just knit, or I should say purl your stitches until you get to the next series of short row stitches. And then we'll just place another marker. So for me, I'm just knitting, or I should say purling 8 stitches here. And then this is the last one, because the next stitch here, this is a short row stitch, because you see it's got the 2 loops in one there. So I'm just going to place another marker on the right hand needle and then continue purling all these next stitches too. So purl all of these double stitches, these short row stitches, as though it was one stitch. So this is like a purl 2 together. So you've got 2 loops that you're just going to take together and treat as though it's one stitch. And then on the very last stitch we'll make a short row again. Short row stitch. And here's the last short row stitch, and now I've got 1 stitch left, and on this stitch we're going to make a short row stitch. Now this is a purl one, so I'm just going to slip it over, and this stitch will have the tendency to open up because this was the first stitch that we made. So if it opens up, you can just pull it tight with the yarn tail. I'm just going to slip it over to the right needle and then just pull it a little bit tight, because like I said, this is the yarn tail that we started off with. So this is the very first stitch that we knit when we started the heel. Then pick up the purl bump that's on that stitch. And I've got my yarn the wrong way. Then insert through there and knit that loop. Now you've got 2 stitches in one again, so this is a double stitch, and slip that double stitch to the left hand needle and pull your yarn tails a little tight so that this stitch is nice and neat. And now you can rotate your work again, turn your work to have the knit side facing again. I've got my yarn tails just slightly uncooperative, so now there's a short row stitch on your right hand needle and on your left hand needle you've got all of these normal stitches, and here on the far side there's a short row stitch again. And now we're going to start working more short rows. Increase row 3, what we're going to do is we're going to knit all these stitches until we're to the second marker, and there we're going to work a double stitch. So we're just going to knit all stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 stitches. Now this first marker, you're just going to slip this one over and then continue to knit until you're to the second marker. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 stitches. And now I'm just going to remove the marker, and in the next stitch I'm going to make a short row stitch knitwise, because we have the knit side of our work facing. So the loop here to the bottom, just pick that up, pop it on the needle, knit it through, and just place it back. And that's a short row stitch. And now turn your work to have the purl side facing. In row 4, increase row 4, we're going to work a purl stitch up to the marker and then work a double stitch in the next stitch. So that means I'm just going to purl a few stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I just remove the marker, and then in the next stitch I'm going to work a short row stitch, a double stitch purlwise. So just slip that stitch over, grab the loop that's here to the bottom so that we can work an increase, and slip them back. So now I've got two loops there on the needle. And turn your work to have the right side facing again. So increase row 5 and the next one as well, row 6. So 5 is the knit row and 6 is the purl row. Going to be doing, and these 2 rows are repeat rows. You're going to be repeating the same concept until you've finished almost the entire heel. What we're going to do is we're going to knit all stitches till we're to the double stitch. Now here's the double stitch. Then we knit the double stitch, and then in the stitch after that we turn that into a double stitch. So what's going to be happening is this double stitch is going to be moving one position to the left on the purl row, and on the knit row, and here is also going to move to the outside. So these double stitches either side are going to start moving outwards, and that's what we're going to be doing in the next 2 row repeats. Now first for row 5, so I'm just going to knit every stitch until I get to the double stitch, and for every time you repeat row 5 it's going to be 1 stitch more that you need to knit until you get to the double stitch. There you go. So now I've knit all stitches. Then the next stitch here is the double stitch, because you see you've got the 2 loops in one, so that's the way to recognize it. So I knit these 2 together. Yeah. And then we turn the following stitch into a double stitch. And this is knitwise. And just slip them back. And now turn our work the other way to have the purl side facing for row 6. For row 6, again, purl every stitch till you get to the double stitch, then purl the double stitch, and then turn the next stitch into a double stitch. So this is the same idea as on the knit row, except now you're purling and not knitting. So I'm just going to knit, or I should say purl these stitches together. So that's 1, 2, and again also here every time you do a row 6 repeat, you're going to be purling just 1 stitch more than you did the time before. And this one, the yarn is a little bit thinner at this point. Now I've purled all the stitches. This stitch here is the double stitch because I can see it's one thread is a little fluffy and the other one is not, but you've got two loops in there. So I'm just going to knit both of them together as though they were one stitch, and then the next stitch I turn that into a double stitch, and this is again purl wise. There we go. And then turn the work to have the knit side facing. Rows 7 and 8 is going to be a repetition of rows 5 and 6 that you just worked. So what you're going to do is you're going to now knit all these stitches, then knit the double stitch here and turn the next stitch into a double stitch. Then likewise when you come back you're going to purl all your stitches, purl the double stitch and turn the next stitch into a double stitch. And what's going to happen is these double stitches are going to be moving outward one position at a time. And to repeat rows 5 and 6 until you have 2 double stitches either side. So that means you're going to stop when you've turned this second last stitch here, when you've turned that into a double stitch and you've turned this one here into a double stitch. So then and those two at the far edge, you're going to leave them for the moment. Don't worry about those. So continue this process of moving these double stitches outwards until you have turned your second last stitches either side into a double stitch, and at that point you'll have the knit side facing. When you've done all your increases, I should say, you're at this point here. You have 2 double stitches on the left needle, then a whole series of regular stitches, and on the right needle you've also got 2 double stitches. You can see them there. And this completes the heel. So now you can see you've really got this pocket. This is like a triangle. You see the top triangle and bottom triangle, and actually it's the same shape as the toe of the heel. Now before we continue with the rest of the sock, because we've now finished the heel, I'm just going to cut the green yarn. So I'm just going to leave a nice tail so I can work that in later. And before we continue, we're just going to slip all of these stitches that are on the double pointed needle. We're just going to slip them back on the circular needles. These stitches that are on the double pointed needle, we're just going to slip them back on the circular needles. Now I'm just going to start. We've got these 2 double stitches here. I'm just going to slip these back onto the left double pointed needle. So now I've got them all on the double pointed needle, and then I'm going to slip them back on the circulars. And if you're unsure which end of the circular needle to take, I'm just going to pull this circular needle back and then look at the yarn tail that's from the main sock. So this is the blue yarn here. This is the one that we want to continue with knitting. Now if the yarn tail is here on the back needle, that means the double pointed needle here to the front will have to be replaced by the circular needle in this direction. So because I want to have them both pointing to the right, like this, with the yarn tail on the back needle. So that means I'm going to grab this circular needle, this one here, and then starting from the left, I'm just going to pop them all back. So I'm going to start on the left hand side of the double pointed needle and then just slip them all back. And this first one, this first stitch here is a double stitch, and the second one is 2, and then all the other stitches are just normal stitches. I'm just going to slip them all back, and this takes just takes a little time, just a few minutes, but then you've got them all nicely back in place. I've got 3 more left. So this is the last regular stitch, and now I've got 2 more double stitches. There we go. And now I've got everything back here on the circular needle, and then the other circular needle on the other side. And these are the 2 yarn tails that are from the heel. I'm just going to push these inside. That just makes it a little bit easier. And if you now look at your work, you've got the yarn tail on the back needle. You've got 28 stitches on the back, and then on the front needle you've got 2 double stitches, a whole series of regular stitches, and then again 2 double stitches on the far side. And then now we're at the point where we can continue with the rest of the sock, which is going to be the leg.